Welcome to Online Privacy, Class 2 in the Fundamental Digital Literacy Skills program, presented in partnership by your local library and Chinook Arch Regional Library System. I want to start by acknowledging that the land we live, work, and gather on is the home of the Blackfoot people who have gathered here for centuries. I'd like to offer my respect to their history, culture, beliefs, and relationship to the land. This is also home to the Alberta Métis Nation Region 3. Here's a breakdown of what we will be talking about in today's lesson, and you are more than welcome to follow along in your guides. These guidebooks are yours to keep, so go ahead and write in them as much as you want. It is important to understand that there is no way to be 100% protected online. It is like driving a car. There are always risks, but we take steps to minimize those risks and make them less likely. This is known as practicing cyber or digital hygiene. So what is the point of this class, if not to put you off exploring the internet? Knowledge itself is power, after all. And so I want to point out some of the risks that you will face so you know what to watch out for and how to keep yourself safe. So what is the difference between privacy and security? Privacy means you are safeguarding your identity and online activity, while security is safeguarding your data as a whole. Both are related and important. Every time you visit a website, you leave behind and add to what is known as your browser or digital fingerprint, which is a collection of unique identifiable information that can be tracked and sold. It's very hard to prevent this type of tracking, and so what we do is take steps to minimize how much information is remembered and discovered about you. As a first step, consider using the private versions of your web browser, such as the Google Incognito. This cuts down on how much information the internet will remember about you at any one time. You also need to consider your computer's usability. There does need to be some communication between your computer and the internet in order for you to navigate it smoothly. It is a fine balancing act between your security measures, desired level of privacy, and desired level of access. Your privacy levels are also a balancing act between your liberty online, your desired levels of security, and computer usability. So what makes up your data? There are a lot of different pieces of information that make up your data, or essentially your identity online, and some are more obvious than others. It is a good idea to make a list of your personal privacy triggers, the information about you that you'd like to protect, and try to keep this information from being online. Think broadly as well. For example, are you the caretaker of someone else's information? Now, who might want your private data? Again, some of these categories are more obvious than others. One of the reasons why digital privacy laws might be considered lax, or vary so widely between countries, is because every country has their own regulations, and there is currently no way to enforce a universal standard. So what sorts of risks will you face online? Social engineering is the human element, and not necessarily unique to the digital world. These are people who use deception to ask for personal or confidential information. Usually it's done in person, over the phone, but it is also worth mentioning that it happens through email as well. These sorts of scammers will usually approach you by exploiting familiarity, creating a hostile situation, or by having gathered information about you beforehand, so their demands sound legitimate and personalized. Know what information you can give out and how legitimate organizations will request that information. Be assertive when checking as well. If something sounds suspicious, you ask if you can speak to their supervisor or to see some identification. Malware refers to harmful programs that get installed on your device, and unfortunately, you don't usually know that they have been installed. These are also called worms, or Trojan horses, or adware, etc. They generally come attached to emails or on downloads, so always ask yourself, did I want to download this? It's always a good idea to install or enable a pop-up blocker as well, and to turn off any automatic download settings or autoplay settings that you have on your device. Also, please keep on top of your browser and security operating system updates. They usually have important improvements to your computer's built-in security. Scareware refers to those scary pop-ups that tell you your computer is infected and you need to click here to remove it. These are usually infected with some kind of virus, and so it's a good idea to not click on it, and even avoid clicking on the X that usually exits out of a window if you can. Sometimes these pop-ups are what is known as click-jacked, meaning that by clicking anywhere on the pop-up, you will gain the scammer access. The X to exit is just a cover. You can either shut down your computer and restart it, or try the keystrokes Ctrl-Alt-F4 to open a menu that allows you to delete programs. Phishing is the attempt to get sensitive information or money by pretending to be a trustworthy organization or source through email. If you don't recognize the sender, don't respond. If the sender is someone familiar, ask yourself if it seems out of character or if the request makes you uncomfortable. A good rule of thumb is, if in doubt, throw it out. Now, these next two are not necessarily risks the same way malware or phishing scams are, but they are things to still be aware of as you are on the internet. Cookies are small pieces of data that are stored on your computer by websites that you visit, and they can help improve a website's usability. Cookies often contain the information that allow you to put things in your Amazon cart, but wait a few days before buying. Amazon remembers your computer information thanks to these cookies. However, that is just it. This information is used to build a data profile of you that can be tracked and or sold. Use content and cookie blockers to keep them from being installed if you wish, and it's also a good idea to delete them from your browser settings regularly, like spring cleaning. Think of it like dusting your house. If you're going to keep collecting cookies as you explore the internet, but this way you cut down on them building up. And using private browsers will also help in this case, as your computer will not remember any cookies you installed once you exit out of a private browser. The final one I want to mention is public Wi-Fi. It's usually not as secure or private as your own setup, or something you've had to input a password for. Public Wi-Fis are more likely to gather and sell your data as well. As part of them being able to offer their service for free, they get their money by selling data. It's a good idea to avoid using public Wi-Fi for secure tasks like online banking if at all possible. If you are worried about the state of your current privacy management, here are some tools that you can use for quick assessments. Officially, doxing means to publish or make public personal information about someone, like their name and their address, and recently has been in the news a lot because it is an awful thing to do to someone else and to have done to you. In our case, however, doxing yourself means to Google your name and email address and see what information someone else can find out about you. It's a good idea to make note of where the information is located as well. you may not be able to remove this information from the internet, but you will at least be aware that it is out there. Have I Been Pwned is a great website to check to see if your email and/or passwords have been revealed in data breaches. When you get to the website, you enter your information in the search box. If results come up, don't panic. Check the date of each breach and then change your passwords as well. Older email addresses are more likely to come up on these breach lists because they have been used in so many places and for so long. Panopticlick will test your internet browser's privacy protections and settings. Again, it's best to keep on top of your updates so these security settings are always up to date. And finally, do a security audit of your social media accounts. This means you visit your privacy settings and make sure they are set as you want them. It's a good idea to do this at least once or twice a year. Here's an activity that we can do as a class if you want. All right. So here I have some technologies that you might find helpful. They're all fairly basic, and so fitting in with the idea of digital hygiene, but they are definitely effective. Encryption simply means to have a passcode or password that you have to enter in order to unlock your device. For example, on your phone or when you first turn on your computer. This is the first line of defense, essentially, as it makes it harder for thieves to get into your private stuff if your device is stolen. Some devices, like iPhones, will use what is known as biometric encryption, meaning a fingerprint or a face scan in place of a number passcode. Another tool that you can use is a password manager. Essentially, a password manager creates a separate, secure place on your computer that will remember your login information so you don't have to. It's a good idea to install one of these managers rather than allowing your internet browser to remember your login information. These password managers will also generate those very long, nonsensical passwords that some argue are more secure and will be remembered for you. LastPass and 1Password are two of the programs that are rated most highly. A VPN, or Virtual Private Network, will set up a secure, encrypted internet connection, which will hide a lot of personal information about you. For example, it will make you look like you're somewhere else in the world, hiding your actual geolocation. Finally, antivirus software. Not everyone chooses to use one, and some people choose to rely on their device's built-in security. If you do get an antivirus software, make sure it is one you've paid for, and that you've read the manual to see just how much information it will collect from you. And please do continue to stay on top of your operating system updates and have your internal security systems turned on. Now we come to passwords. Keep these qualities in mind. Make it unique, memorable, strong, and long. Whatever you do for your passwords or security questions, don't use information that can be relatively easy to discover. You can even use false information or create a fake online persona to answer security questions from the perspective of, as long as you remember the information. For more sensitive accounts, such as online banking, consider using even more complicated passwords. And remember, it is a good idea to change all of your passwords at least every year, and try not to use the same one for multiple accounts. Children face many of the same risks adults do, and can be especially susceptible to cyberbullying. If you are a parent or guardian worried about your kids, make sure they are aware of the risks that they face when going online, and, depending on their age, perhaps monitor their internet usage. So here's a list of how many children are going online these days, and a list of ways you can prepare them. A lot of these ways will also depend on the age of the child in question. Now we'll just talk a little bit about mis- and disinformation. Shockingly, not everything you read online is true. There is a spectrum of misinformation that ranges from satire or parody to manipulated content. Another thing to remember is that not all misinformation is put online on purpose. Sometimes people make mistakes. If you are unsure about the validity of something online, check the source. This includes not only checking the site it's from, but also the author. This is especially true if you're reading something on a blog or see an article on your Facebook feed. Some people say that you should approach anything that you read online with a grain of salt and a little bit of doubt. Fake news is a term that we hear a lot of these days, and it is a specific type of misinformation. It is the deliberate spread of incorrect information with the intent to mislead for financial, political, or social purposes, and is also known as disinformation. And it is not a new thing. Disinformation has been around for centuries, but now, thanks to the internet, it is even easier to spread and create. Because of the amount of information we now consume and how fast we consume it, we aren't necessarily as careful in our checking, so we run the risk of falling for it more than we did in the past. Other reasons why we fall for it is simply because there is a growing distrust in media outlets and governments, and it often appeals to and plays on our emotions about issues. Finally, our biases come into play. Implicit biases are our unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that we use to sort people into groups, while confirmation bias is our tendency to search for and interpret information that already supports our beliefs. So here are some steps that you can take to identify fake news or, again, any sort of misinformation. And remember, disagreeing with an article does not necessarily make it fake news. Neither are any mistakes made in news articles, which are usually corrected by the author as soon as they are known. If there is time, here is a quiz you can take to see if you can test your ability to identify fake news. Finally, here is a handy list of tips and actions that you can take to practice digital or cyber hygiene. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. Thank you all for your participation. And I do hope that I didn't scare you off exploring the internet and that you have gained some confidence. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.